These are days of shaking, where pillars will fall to the ocean. We'll lie in the long grass of the garden and speak in...
So, why do we tell kids the Tooth Fairy exists or Father Christmas? And it's when we were talking, the producer of my album and some of yours, Emily, Andy Bell, we were outside a pub, our normal environment in Sheffield, weren't we, last year? And we were talking about this, like, why do you tell your children about the Tooth Fairy? Why don't you just say, your tooth has fallen out, you'll grow a new one, you can keep the old tooth or whatever? But we create this magic that, if you put it under your pillow, a supernatural creature will come and take your tooth and give you, in my day, it was 20 to 50p. It's probably inflation. It's probably a £5 note now. But why do we do that, do you think, Emily? Why as
I think it's a really fascinating question, because lots of people who don't believe themselves and who aren't religious or don't have magical thinking, or wouldn't say they would, they still have this kind of belief in the importance of the preservation of magic amongst children. And it's kind of like so many people are in cahoots, all these parents, because everybody believes, and all the kids do, and you see the wonder that it brings to them. And then I think as adults, it brings me vicariously, leech off the wonder. Because you remember the magic of what that meant to you. And I think that's a reflection of how important it is, or it was to us, if we then think it's important enough to preserve it for our children, despite it feels there's an element of cruelty, isn't there, in knowing that at some point the layers are going to peel away and they'll discover that maybe the world isn't quite as magical as they thought it was. And it's brutal. It's brutal what we do on one level, and yet I certainly wouldn't want to bring my kids up without a sense of that, and comes so naturally to them. I'm just like constantly amazed by my son, the way that he plays imaginatively. He is in that imaginary world so much. He transforms into so many different amazing magical creatures. I've got this, I've got wings, and I've got this golden I don't know whatever it is, wand, or and he's constantly being part human, part superhuman, or part animal, part hero, or whatever it is, shapeshifter. He loves to be shapeshifters, and I'm amazed by how easy that is for him to just drift between these different elements of existence. And he's got all these imaginary friends that just appeared as well. There was like Hedrick just appeared one day and hung around for some, and Hedrick himself was a shapeshifter who lived in this flying tree and would just sometimes be half skunk, half squirrel. But it was, I guess what I'm kind of getting at in this is that what a wonderful thing it gave, and it gives him this extra exciting and highly coloured, vivid sense of the power of imagination. And I think, who knows how much he believes in Hedrick, but I certainly am not going to be the one to go to say, well, isn't it time that you stopped talking about Hedrick? Because I wonder if Hedrick is actually there for him, and whatever it is, whatever he thinks at different points, what it provides for him is this sense that when he goes to Hedrick's house, anything is possible. Any kind of magic. And he goes there apparently and just watches TV, like whatever he wants, for ages. And I think it's that sense of wish fulfillment is possible in that kind of other world. And I just feel like there's something that we need to I would like to encourage that amount of imagination both in children, but also in us. I think we need to have those moments of, I wouldn't even call it escape, but certainly being able to be absorbed by things other than the everyday.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, and going back to your point about, you know, we tell children about the tooth fairy, and is it because it's joy? There's joy, like when children come down on Christmas Day and they think that these presents have magically appeared. There's joy, and adults get a lot of joy from seeing that joy in younger people. And as humans, maybe that the kids are teaching us that actually that is what we're all trying to get to. Magic on the whole, because we can talk about bad magic or evil magic, magical thinking, but that sort of, you know, that joy, magic brings awe and joy, and as you said, suspension of belief. And the fact that children have, you know, games and magic is a safe space, isn't it? And I always remember there was I read a book, I think it's called Dance Macabre. It's a Stephen King book, and it's where he analyses horror stories and fantasy fiction. And he sort of looks at his own practice, and he says, well, you know, why is it that when you're a kid, you read lots of fantasy books, or I certainly did. I was all into Lord of the Rings and goblins and magic, and you read a lot of that. But then as you become an adult, most people would stop reading fantasy fiction. You might go on to somewhere else, and that's not to say that fantasy fiction as a genre doesn't have its adult themes. But Stephen King made this really important point, I thought, was that fantasy and horror is a safe space for young people to explore emotions without getting hurt, because they know deep down as a human, you know it's not real. So you can read, you can be brave, you can be sad, you can explore some of those emotions in a fantasy environment. And nothing happens. You go back to tea time afterwards, and you're safe. And I wonder whether there's safety in magical thinking as well.
And that really draws a parallel for me with going back to ballads as well. It makes me think about this writer on ballads, David Atkinson. He calls ballads cultural safety valves, and I really love that phrase. It's always stuck with me. Again, this opportunity to explore complex emotions and taboos as well, the edges. They're often ballads are right, you know, it's a bit like soap operas. They're kind of right into the nitty gritty kind of grim realities, and also that, you know, these magical characters pop up in them as well, in some of them, so they can. But I think as a way for people to explore themselves and to kind of understand human emotions and the way and society, the way that society works and what's acceptable and what isn't, and all that is kind of explored in this safe way. And I certainly think that's true of when you're kind of listening to music as well and getting really caught up in the story of a song.
Yeah,
absolutely. There's an exploration that happens, and a chance to move into a different mind state, perhaps.
Where pillars will fall to the ocean, we'll lie in the long grass of the garden and speak